This is the CocoaMojo Mark II Cocoa Bean Winnower. It consists primarily of a vertical tube with a shop vac attached to the top for suction. Cocoa beans are first ground in the cracker, and then the ground cocoa beans are poured in the inlet, halfway up the tube. The shop vac is turned on, and the lighter, undesirable shell is sucked upwards, while the heavier, desirable nib falls downwards. This cocoa bean winnower was built for Happy Goat Caramels in San Francisco. Founder Mike Winnicke and I did a test run with the original prototype. So here are the roasted beans, ready for cracking. Mike, do you want to give this a shot, or do you want to hold the camera?
I'll hold the camera here. This is your masterpiece here, Peter. So
there's just a pot underneath, and there's 3 clamps holding this thing down because there's actually enough torque on this Frankenstein with this Craftsman drill to flip it off the table, which we're using. Yeah, you can see it falling in.
That's handling it, no problem.
It's a lot easier than doing it by hand.
Alright, so this is the result of our first run through the Frankenstein. And this is actually a really good bean to winnow. It's got a pretty thin shell that comes right off, and it almost looks like, you can see this big piles of nibs and actually kind of nice big chunks of loose husk here, which is nice because the more pieces that it gets cracked into, generally the more dust. So you like to see these kind of nice large pieces. Alright, so next step would be to run this through a sieve, through a screen system that we have almost set up over here.
This is actually a 1/4-inch screen, and well, this is aluminum window screen, and that's 1/8 inch, which is basically what Orchard had.
Okay. Agitation is gonna do the trick.
Definitely agitation helps, yeah.
Alright, so that's good. That's everything. Let's take a look at what we got down here.
Whoa.
So, much better, huh?
Oh yeah. The ratio's gone down from, well, what was it, like maybe 10% nib before?
Oh yeah. To much better here, and the ones that are actually going through are not the fault of the winnower. They're probably more the cracker that didn't separate the shell and the nib in the first place. We kind of have whole beans that are the ones that are getting through. So that's a great sign. All we have to do is run this through twice, and this setting should be perfect for the first level of screen.
Oh, and that happens to be all the way closed on this valve, which is a 1.5 inch actually ball valve. We did have to make one little change to the intake to get a bit more suction. It's got this big 3-inch opening, and it's been duct taped almost, I don't know, it's about 3/5 closed.
And that actually made a huge difference. It was all going through before, so.
Right, for that level 1, that hole was just too big. There wasn't enough suction for these big chunks. This is a 2.5 horsepower shop vac, by the way.
We had really good results here with the nibs. We had a good ratio, probably one more pass through, and this would be completely clean. Now the other big question is, do we have too much suction? Did we suck through a whole bunch of nib in addition to shell? And so ideally we're going to have basically shell with just maybe a few smaller pieces of nib in here. Alright. As you can see, that's almost entirely shell. So this is very efficient. We're really not losing anything here, which is great. Compared to when I was doing this by hand, I'd probably lose like 5 or 10% in nib just by blowing it out with the shell. So this is a great improvement, and I think the screening system is a big part of that.
We are now feeding the second level of screen through.
So the nibs here are smaller than the first chunk, and there's also just definitely a higher ratio of, there's more nib than shell in this mixture. The first screen was a lot more shell than nib. And we are trying to generate enough suction here that we are going to finally get some nib coming through. That way we'll know that we're at the upper level of, we've actually overshot it and we can start kind of moving down.
Right, and so the way we've done that is by modifying the apparatus. We've added more tape over here so that basically just the funnel fits through. And now what we wanted to do is we totally closed off the valve here, and at that point it actually started sucking nib into the shop vac, so now we've opened it to about half, and hopefully it'll start running pretty well. This is the results. How do they look?
Looks fantastic. This is really clean. It looks like the only bits of shell we're getting through here are pieces that were already attached to a bean. This is great. This is probably about as good a quality as we could hope for from a machine like this. And it's certainly well below the 1% by weight nib permissible by law. So this is going to be fantastic.
What do you got there, Mike?
All right, well, this is the end result of our first, run of the Winnower here.
The CocoaMojo Winnower.
And I'm pretty happy with it. This is definitely, mostly nib. The one thing that we might want to work on in the future is for the very last screen, we set the airflow here to just about 1/8 of the way closed. It's mostly open. It's mostly open. And we're still getting a lot of germ coming through. And I don't know if separation of germ is something that we can solve with the Winnower. That might be either a screen solution, or maybe perhaps even just dumping out everything that's part of this last screen. Because while there was a fair amount of nib, there was also a pretty high percentage of germ.
What do you think the percentage was of the germ?
Maybe 20%? Is that about right? I mean, you took...
Yeah, that was a lot. We didn't see any germ really in the other levels.
Yeah, I mean, which we wouldn't expect. I've made chocolate with germ in it before. It's not, it doesn't make a huge difference. But if it's something that we can avoid or get some out of, that'd be fine. But overall, this is great. And this actually took us a fair amount of time to go through this process. I think the biggest things that are going to speed this up are coming up with a box for doing the screening. If we can come up with a faster way to separate out the different levels, that's going to be huge. And now that we know each setting on the airflow over here, that should be pretty quick too. Cheers!
Yeah!